That was fantastic. We built a small home, and that's a really rewarding experience because you really built it from the beginning to the end and handed the family the keys. And you spent the week with the family.
Wow.
And they had another home right beside it. And, at lunchtime you're eating, and a little bit of how much time you're putting into different things. And unfortunately, it tends to be work. And one thing I learned is life should never be about work. Your family life or impacts your ability to give back. You need to really say, you know what, I can do that tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's not as we sometimes we take it too urgently or too critically, that a situation that, oh no, I need to do this, I need to work on it. No, you probably don't, and you can use that time to give back.
Yeah. And one of the things that I like to say is, work can wait, but life can't wait. And I don't know if you've heard this before, and this is one of the things that I really admire Satya, CEO of Microsoft. And I remember at one point he mentioned that, actually multiple points, he mentioned that work should support our lifestyle. It shouldn't be the other way around. Work should be part of us, but work shouldn't be all of us.
Movember for the guys out there.
So it's always hard to grow a beard.
That's okay. Facial hair growing is usually not on their list, but it's just information sharing and community, and don't bottle it up, because stress will eventually hit a peak.
When I wanted to ask you about your transition between your birth mother, I guess, to your mother, I wasn't quite sure what terminology that I should use. Should I be using given up? But that's exactly how you described it. When you were describing, the situation, you mentioned given up. Is that how you felt for you?
In my situation, and I don't think it applies to every situation, but my mother wasn't in the position to care for a child. She wasn't married. She was quite young. It didn't fit in the dynamics of that family at that time. So yeah, I was given up for adoption to a family that was looking to care for a child, was prepared to care for it and providing them a good life, just like hopefully my mother was looking to do as well, but maybe wasn't ready for it at that time.
Hey guys, thank you so much for following this channel and making our podcast into the top 3% global podcast ranking. When I started a year ago, I didn't think anyone would listen to this podcast, but it was you who made this a success. Now, before you watch the full video, please do me a small favor. Please hit the subscribe button to help me understand a bit more about your experiences and how we can improve our contents. In every video, I have a deep conversation with someone whom I've recently met. We talked about different topics, including mental health, mindset, entrepreneurship, career, and most importantly, their stories on how they transform themselves from the younger self. I hope these conversations are useful to you and can bring you new perspectives. Please enjoy.
Hey guys, welcome back to this special episode. And the reason why I said it's special is because we are going live, or at least I'm trying to go live on a couple of social media channels that hasn't been working out, but that's okay. It is also my first recording in 2023. So a big happy Chinese New Year to all of you. And today is also my birthday. So I'm turning 39 today.
Happy birthday.
What an honor. Thank you, Michael. What an honor to be recording an episode with Michael De Haas. I met Michael a few months ago. We heard of Michael from a mutual friend. I did a podcast episode with a mutual mate of ours, Ali Kobani. If you haven't listened to it, check it out. It was really good. And there was another sharing, a volunteering sharing from Michael a few months ago at Microsoft. And I heard it. That was just inspirational. I thought, I need to get this guy on the show here and chat a bit more about his humbling background and the amazing work that he has done on volunteering. Michael, where are you now? I see beautiful mountains at the back of yours.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Aaron, and great to be on the podcast. Today, you find me at my home in the backyard. We're very lucky to have a backyard, being in Hong Kong. But you get a backyard when you live far away from Central. So this nice, beautiful mountain line that you see behind us, just if you go on the other side of that, you need a special permit because it's so close to China. So when people ask me, "Oh, where do you live?" I'm like, almost in China, but it's very beautiful here, and we can hike up in our space all the time. We take our dog out and enjoy the neighborhood, and village life here is actually quite nice. So it's funny when my friends in Hong Kong, if you know Hong Kong very well, and you have some friends, and you have island friends and new territory friends, and they go, "Oh, you live on not on the island. That's so far. I can't go there. Why do you live so far?" And then they come and visit, and they're like, "When can we come again?" So yeah, it's a bit far, but being Canadian, it's not that far.
Yeah. Well, love, like I said at the start of the conversation when you first came on, I thought there was a wallpaper from where I saw it.
It's maybe I should sit outside and do more of my meetings in the backyard. But yes, it's actually real. It's not just an image.
Yeah. And as you can see from my background, I'm sitting inside one of my rooms here, not that interesting compared to yours. Hey, but I wanted to have a chat with you for two things, right? From Ali, I learned that you've got a very different background. You were adopted from birth. We had a chat about this when we were having coffee on Monday. I have thought about adoption, and I think it is a topic that is on a lot of people's mind, and I would love to chat to you about that. You know, your upbringing, what life was like when you were young, any questions that you had maybe during your childhood, and I guess how you came to terms with all this. I think that'll be interesting. And then perhaps the second part of it is, I know, and during your sharing last time, you said you do a lot of volunteering work and a lot of interesting volunteering work. And it'll be good to, I think, share experiences with other people, and maybe you can share, some lessons learned here and there from doing interesting work, helping and lifting other people up. Yeah. Should we start with your background? You want to tell us a little bit about, how you grew up?
Yeah. I had a very evolving childhood, as you mentioned, and maybe we'll get into a little bit more detail of that shortly. But I was adopted. I was born in Canada, in Ottawa, a long time ago. My birthday is coming up shortly as well. And my father was in the Canadian military at that time. And for those people who have family in the services, moving around a lot is quite normal. So every 2 years we were moving from Canada to Bermuda to Northwest Territories to prairies. And so we moved around quite a bit, and I got used to a lot of change. And then my father retired and took over my grandparents' business, and we kind of settled into the Vancouver Lower Mainland area for most of the rest of my teen years, and then getting into my after school years. Myself, I was adopted, as I mentioned, and it was a bit different of adoption compared to some of the adoptions I hear about. And I think especially now, my birth mother actually requested to meet the adopted parents that were being selected. So that's not really as far as I know, that's not really the norm. Usually it's kind of quite separated to make it easier for both sides of the process, if you will. And my birth mother was quite young, so that was one of the reasons why I was being given up. She wasn't married, she was in her teens, and just wasn't in the right situation to take on a family at that time. So she was looking for adoption. And yeah, funnily enough, my parents knew I was coming, but they were already going on hopefully a quick trip, if I remember correctly, to Hawaii. And they were halfway there, and then they found out, oh, sorry, I arrived early, and turned around, and they flew back and picked me up. So it's a good
nice
surprise. Yeah, it was a nice surprise for them, of course. They knew we were expecting. They just came a little bit early. Yeah, and then, but then, very shortly after that, we moved to Bermuda. Sometimes I wish we moved to Bermuda a little bit later, because I don't really remember that much of it compared to when I lived in Northwest Territories, which was one extreme to the other. You live on the beach, and then you live on the snow beach where there's just absolutely no trees. But then, yeah, to my adoption life, my sister also was adopted. She's about 4 years younger than me, and when we lived in the Northwest Territories, we adopted her as well. And our family, my parents' family is very, very large. I think, 8 brothers and sisters on both sides of the family. Average kids of my uncles and aunts were 3 to 5. We were the smaller of the families, and I would think there's probably 150 to 200 relatives on both sides of the family. So quite large on that side. And then
when did you find out you were adopted? When was that message?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question.
Communicated to you.
And people asked this before, and I actually never asked my parents, but my parents I don't remember the time. And I don't remember the time because I think it was told to me it was not a secret. My parents were quite open with that. So I don't remember a moment where they sat me down and said, "Hey, you know, you were adopted and, this is the story." It's just we kind of knew that. And the same thing was for my sister as well. There was a bit more information for me because my parents had met my mother, but still it was very limited, the information sharing. For my sister, there was no information. It was what you would know as a kind of like a very clean adoption. You sign up for the adoption process, you go through that, and then they say, "Here's your child," and away. And so yeah, I never had that moment. I knew I was adopted, but I had a very loving family, and our larger family was just a very supportive family. We didn't really talk about it. It wasn't really a conversation discussion. Not that it was hiding anything, but we never had any really concern about it. Or, I think primarily because we were quite a loving and caring family that we don't have any reason to think about that. And one of the other questions, that was a really good question. One of the other questions that I get quite regularly is, "Oh, did you go and find your parents? Did you want to go find your parents because you had a bit of information?" And especially these days with DNA testing, and it's not a difficult process to find information or even find relatives or distant relatives, and you work your way there. I actually never went that route. I never really had a dying interest. Some people do for various reasons, and some people don't. I think primarily for me, it was maybe two reasons. One, I didn't have any reason to find out my birth parents. My parents were loving. I had a good family and upbringing. And maybe I was also concerned of what I might find on the other side, right? It might be good, great.
Mm-hmm.
It might be bad. Do I really want to deal with that? Is there any need to bring that into my life? So I was like, I'll just leave it for now. And maybe because I'm male, I'm a little bit more simplistic, so I'm not so worried about that. But from a health perspective, it did come up. So I think if you've ever gone and done health insurance or, life insurance or anything that requires you go to the doctor, they say, "Oh, do you have a hereditary of this or that?" You're like, "No idea. I was adopted. You take a guess," right?
Yeah.
So
I hope your insurance company is not listening on this.
I just got my new life insurance approved just a couple days ago, so I'm good. So yeah, from a health perspective, I was interested. I was like, oh, if I could just get my parents' health records, that would be kind of interesting. So yeah, and then kind of fast forward a little bit to the direction we were going. I think it was maybe 6 years ago or so, just around Christmas time, out of the blue, I got a Facebook message from some person, and it had an image of a long Canadian birth certificate. In Canada, the old days, you had these really long ones, and said, "Hey, I found this in my mom's stuff. I'm organizing her stuff. And, my mom had mentioned something about a child before, and found this birth certificate. There's a bunch of Michael De Haases in the world, not that many. I was wondering if it was you." And I'm looking at it, and I show my wife, and she's like, looks like yours, but a bit different. And I send it to my mom, and I'm like, "I don't know, does this look legit or not? It seems like it is." And he goes, "Oh, could be." So I responded back, "Yeah, it could be mine," and started asking more questions. And I guess long story short, it was my stepbrother. He was taking care of our mother's stuff because she had some health challenges and was in her home, and I was just cleaning up her personal stuff and came across this birth certificate. And yeah, it was my original birth certificate. When you get adopted, they create another new birth certificate for you with your new parents and that type of thing. And since then we've stayed in touch. We've met his family. They also adopted a young girl, and we've stayed in touch since then. Haven't really got in touch with my mother yet either. Have asked a few questions from my stepbrother. And, I think I got what I was interested in, and, a little bit on the health side, just a couple curious questions on, how she is and validating the situation. And we talked a little bit more about that. And they were a religious family, and there were some concerns around that as well, which is understandable. And, we stay in communication regularly. And so that's kind of nice to know that there's, someone else that's close blood relative. And so we try to meet up every once in a while when we're back in Canada.
Well, that's nice to hear. Yeah. Growing up, I also have a few stepbrothers and stepsisters from my dad's previous marriage, but we never got to meet each other. And I think there were a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding between the two families. So about a couple of years ago, I finally met up with my stepsister, with one of my stepsisters and one of my stepbrothers. It's like the most beautiful things ever. So I just opened up, we had a coffee. I mean, the night before, my wife asked, are you nervous about the meeting? Would there be awkward silence? What are you guys going to talk about? And I was like, I have no idea. But I'm just going to go in and tell her, everything that happened to my childhood. And that's exactly what I did. And she shared hers. And then we realized, we're both victims of the marriages. And, but yeah, I really echo on what you just said. I mean, we really can't control what happens with the generations. Yeah. But for people who have stepbrothers and stepsisters out there, I strongly encourage you to go out and just have a conversation with them. It's a whole new world that you're going to discover. And I think just having conversations and dialogue with these people will help you clear a lot of this misunderstanding.
But the one thing that I didn't share as well in my journey, and my wife is probably going to kick my butt later on for that, is how we met. So yeah, my lifehood of adoption when I was younger, but interestingly enough, or oddly, my wife actually comes from a similar scenario of adoption. Hers a little bit different as well. She was born in Busan, Korea, and she was, when you read about the some of these, I don't know, her adoption, or the way that her journey was, she was dropped on the doorstep of the orphanage. So it was, there's nothing connecting her really to anything really at that point. And the orphanage took her in. And back in those days, there was a number of families adopting from Korea, from Europe. And that's where her European family adopted her from Korea when she was 2 years old. And then, of course, went back to the Netherlands, and her family, two very, very tall Dutch boys. And she lived in Holland for a long time. And even then, I think the Asian community was not that large. So she was a little bit of the pearl in the midst, if you will, in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
But yeah, grew up and in another loving family, and journeyed around the world. And it's interesting how we both journeyed around the world and then met up at one point. And yeah, I think a big part of being adopted and understanding the opportunity that we were given in the situation of being adopted, and being lucky to be part of a family. When we came back around and we had, this loving family, we started to understand that we're very privileged to be in a situation like this. And I think that's led to a lot of how we are from a DNA perspective of wanting to give back where we can, whether it's simple things like necessities for people, or education, or even helping out with other children or families that are struggling. It's something that in my family, that my parents and my sister, but also in our family with our two children as well, we try to give back where we can, because we find it's very, very important for many different reasons. So.
And to me, that's a really beautiful thing, right? And we also talk about this when we had our coffee on Monday, is that it takes so many different decision points for both you and your wife to meet, and to be able to recognize that all those privileges that you were given, and I guess use your power to help other people in need. I think that's very inspiring. Before we go to volunteering and some of the amazing work that you guys do, I want to go back on the conversation earlier, because you mentioned a couple of key points that I wanted to draw on. When I wanted to ask you about your transition between your birth mother, I guess, to your mother, I wasn't quite sure what terminology that I should use. Should I be using given up? But that's exactly how you described it. When you were describing, the situation, you mentioned giving up. Is that how it felt for you?
Yeah, I think that's in my situation, and I don't think it applies to every situation. But yeah, my mother wasn't in the position to care for a child. She wasn't married. She was quite young. It didn't fit in the dynamics of that family at that time. So yeah, I was given up for adoption to a family that was looking to care for a child, was prepared to care for it and providing him a good life, just like hopefully my mother was looking to do as well, but maybe wasn't ready for it at that time. And for my sister's case, interestingly enough, she's known she was adopted all her life, and she did her DNA test, and actually her family was looking for her. So it's a bit too early in the stages, and we don't have the detail yet, but don't know if it was given up or not. But now their dynamics is quite different. My sister is very excited to meet them, of course. She was always very interested in learning her background. We always were quite confident she was Native Canadian to some extent. And yeah, she's already had a couple conversations with her family, and yeah, they were really looking for her because they knew that obviously she was given for adoption, but really trying to connect. So on that part, I don't know if it was really given up for adoption or given. Definitely my wife. That's quite obvious. Don't know. I don't think we'll ever find the story behind that.
Yeah.
And my wife hasn't been so interested, a little bit like me, to find that out, but she's very interested to go and visit the orphanage, and she went with her mother to go see it on their first trip back to Korea. So yeah, there's, at least in the experiences I've had around people that have been put up for adoption, it's good experiences. I haven't heard of bad situations. Even my Oma and Opa from my mother's side, they were host families of children who older children. We grew up, we almost called them uncles and aunts, but they were always quite older, and we still stay in touch with a number of them who, yes, completely different families. You could say the temporary adoption, if you will. But yeah, so I think that's another aspect and dynamic of never really being a topic, because it was something that was around us all the time.
Yeah. And the other thing you mentioned, Michael, is that you are a simplistic guy, and there's no real, I guess, urgency to find out what you might not know. And as you were describing it, there's almost like a sense of fear, like a Pandora box that you don't know what is there. You don't want to open it. From people like yourself who have gone through this journey, right? What would be some of the things that you don't want to find out?
Oh, I mean, I can use like extreme examples, of course, like, I don't know, the person's in jail or, has maybe major health issues, right? So you want to know about health, but maybe you don't want to know about health. In these days and ages, you can deal with a lot of those things, but it's really the negativity that you're like, well, I have a good life. I believe I'm quite lucky. I have a loving family. I'm healthy. So do I need to potentially put in something in there that skews with that? Maybe not. Am I being maybe a bit selfish? Like in my sister's case, right? So her parents or her family was really looking for her. So should I also think it from that perspective and say, maybe for them, it's something that I should do more so than for me, right? And then, that's a different way to look at it, because at the end of the day, they are your birth parents, and they had their situation, whatever that was. So, but yeah, so I guess it's an interesting question, and I think some people deal with it differently. Most, I think I'm very interested, but they try to figure out how to address it, and it comes down to the individual and what they want to do. I don't know if there's any right or wrong way to do that, but if you're interested, it's not difficult to find the journey to potentially find relatives, especially these DNA programs. So many people have done it. And it could be a distant relative that has done it. And you just contact that person, and probably within a couple days of contacting, they're like, oh yeah, my uncle, that's your parents, right? So it's not even like the parents need to do it all the time, or the direct family. It could be, down the tree, if you will. And especially for the older generation, like my parents, they did the family tree is something they did when they retire. And you pick these things up pretty quick. So yeah, it's a way that you can go.
And I hear you. And definitely, I think it varies from person to person, whatever works for you. And I'm just asking mainly because I'm curious. And as you were sharing, I don't get, a lot of opportunities asking these deep questions. So whenever I get the opportunity, I will try.
Yeah.
And as I've also shared with you, my wife and I are also we have considered adoption, but now that we have 2 kids, things have been more complicated. We have different things we need to take into consideration. But even if it's not for ourselves, for other people who are listening on this podcast, I think your sharing is very beneficial to them. After you met your wife, right? How long did it take you to open up? I mean, both of you guys came from a sort of an adoption background, but how many dates did it take to get into this conversation, and who initiated it?
Well, now you're asking me to work on my memory now, which for people who know me, they'll be like, oh, good luck with that. Again, for me, it's not something that was I was of or felt different, that I didn't want to share it. If I remember correctly, it probably came up pretty quick, because as soon as I met her and I knew where her family, I'm like, that's a Dutch family name. And then I could figure out she was adopted pretty fast. I mean, small little Asian lady with a very Dutch family. You're like, yeah, that doesn't really work naturally. So, okay. So yeah, we probably figured out we were adopted probably within the first date. But our friends have been together for many years. We just hadn't crossed paths. So it's that way of the universe of bringing us together. I was working for an American company then, and we did a lot of Christmas events, and you just bring all your friends, which I arranged those events, but I never attended them because I go back to Canada, but she would. So my friend she knew about me for actually, I think a couple of years, but never met me. But yeah, then when we met, yeah, we talked about it quite openly, but didn't really get into a lot of discussion because we were pretty straightforward. Like, I was adopted, my parents this, Canada. Okay, that's cool. Oh, I was adopted from Korea, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, it was, again, we weren't shy about it. It should never be anything that you should feel shy or bad about. There's absolutely nothing wrong. If anything, it's the best thing about the world of adoption, because, it's just like giving back. Someone is giving their life to take someone from the outside into their life. And you were the lucky person to be that one. So just like we like to give back and help people's lives, it's in general, the principle is the same.
Yeah. And for people who are thinking about adoption, what are some of the things that they should be thinking about before they make this decision?
Just like you mentioned, you're maybe contemplating of adopting. We have talked about it a few times as well. I think we kind of passed that stage where we're like, okay, we're comfortable with our 2 kids, and we do support a couple children in orphanages, but adopting is maybe not in the cards right now. I think there's a couple things. One, just like we talked about before, don't hide it. No, your children know there's nothing wrong with it. Don't make it something that's hidden, and then when they turn 16, you tell them, hey, by the way, you're adopted.
You're adopted, yeah.
Yeah, no, just it shouldn't be anything you're worried about.
Yeah.
When you're thinking,
it's almost like if you wait that long to tell that message to them, you almost make it as though there's something wrong with it.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? You have to wait so long to tell them the message, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you should be happy and proud about it. And you should be sharing in your child and even your friends. You should it should never be a negative thing. Never. And I think I've never heard of that situation happening, but I'm sure it did. But yeah, be open and enthusiastic about, the great opportunity that you're having is taking someone into your life and giving them a great life. and they should know that story. And then the other part is around when, just like I alluded, we were thinking about it. Now we're maybe not thinking about it. And, like, oh, we had COVID, or maybe not the right time. Maybe we're moving. It's never going to be a right time in general.
Yeah.
It's like,
just like being a parent.
Exactly. It's in general, you may be able to plan a little bit, but it's just life. And if you're thinking about it, just do it. Just do it. Make sure you have the means to accomplish it, which the whole process will make sure that is the case. They're very regimented around the whole screening and interviews, etc. So that'll get weeded out automatically. But if you're passionate and caring family, it's just a process. It's nothing more than that.
Yeah.
And it takes a while. It's not like, hey, I want to have a kid next week. It's not gonna happen. So even if you say, we're ready now, 2 years down the road is when you may get your child. And then you'd be like, oh crap, no, I'm not ready. Forget it. Just move on with life and enjoy the moment and when you get the opportunity.
Hey, let's shift gear and talk about some of the community work that you and your family have done. What are some of the interesting things that you guys have done and given back to the community? You share a feel at the town hall, but I want to make sure that all the audience also get a feel for this.
Yeah. So the first one is, and I wore this shirt specifically today. So Movember is one that we do, or I do, and actually our family does a little bit to a certain. Every year in November, we spend some time on men's health. It's really important. We're crappy as men to really take the time to know when we should go to the doctor, or when there's too much stress and how it's leading to our family or other things. So it's in November. It's also, unfortunately, when my daughter's birthday is, so she has many pictures with me in a big long mustache. One year she asked me to do something different. So yeah, we do that. And then I think many years ago when we were thinking about adoption, we were on a holiday in the Philippines and looking for things to do. And the hotel said, oh, one of the things we do is we actually go on a day to the local orphanage, and it's a giving back activity. And we were like, really? That's a great idea. I've never been to a hotel, and this was a 5-star hotel, which we've been to a lot of hotels because my wife has been in the hospitality industry all her life. And this is great. And we got our young kids, let's do it. And we went to this orphanage in Cebu, and a great experience. And long story short, now we've been supporting 2 young girls for a number of years in this orphanage, and we send stuff to them on a regular basis. We visit them when we can, when we go to the Philippines. And one is now graduated. She's in university to be a police officer, I think. And the other one, she's still young. I think she's 10, so she still has a few years. So that's our extended family, if you will, from an orphanage. The other notable things that we've done, so on my side, when I worked for a previous company, it was a networking company, and one of their programs was tactical operations and communications group. So the company was good at communications, so we were used in disaster response scenarios. So we went to the Philippines when there was the tsunami, typhoon, all in one in Tacloban, and we supported our customers at that time and a couple NGOs to develop their telecommunications in that area because they had none. Everything was wiped out. So we did a lot of that. I've done charity work for Habitat for Humanity in where did we go? Guatemala, many years ago. That was fantastic. We built a small home, and that's a really rewarding experience because you really built it from the beginning to the end and handed the family the keys. And you spent the week with the family.
Wow.
And they had another home right beside it. And, at lunchtime you're eating. And so that Habitat for Humanity is a great organization. If you don't know about it, check it out. Try to get involved. It's one of the most rewarding experiences you'll ever have in your life. If you're in North America, it's even more accessible because they do it all the time. In Europe or in Asia, they do these kind of trips. And I'm sure now that COVID has passed, they're going to do some more of these trips. So those are There's one, well, not once in a lifetime, but you can do it as many as you want. And then I did one in Sichuan province a number of years ago. A little bit different. We were building an apartment, so we were just part of many people that were building these apartments for underprivileged families looking for permanent homes that they would own over long term. So yeah, different things. Some I use my skills, some and I kind of multi. When I got out of high school, I started building houses, and then I'm in IT now. So I can kind of move my skills back and forth and leverage them, which is kind of funny. When I'm building homes, I'm like, oh, this is quite easy. And they're like, I thought you were in IT. And I'm like, yeah. And oh, we need Wi-Fi. Okay, I'll fix that too. And then my wife, this was a more recent one. So we lived in Macau for 10 years. And as some of you may know, I think actually most people know, China has had actually China, Macau, Hong Kong has had a lengthy zero COVID policy. And Macau is so small. It's pretty much the smallest country in the world with most dense population and really only one primary industry. Their industry was, the revenue was kind of cut off. And a lot of non-local residents struggled to make ends meet. And we have two aunties that help our family for many years. One of them has been with our family now for as long as my daughter has been born. She's part of the family now. So we know a lot of the community. And my wife said, well, this just doesn't make sense. Some of these families, they struggle to eat in a country that had the highest GDP in the world at one point. So we started to acquire names of families or individuals that were struggling without a job and food. And we started to make, my wife started to make food packages for them every day. So our kitchen was a soup kitchen at one point. And I think at one point I'd have to check, I would say 40, 50, 60 people we were feeding. We couldn't cope with it on a daily basis. So we moved to a weekly basis and then started to get some local community individuals donating money to help sponsor, keep continuing the program going. Even a local grocery store was getting involved, and we were getting bags of rice and putting everything together in packages. They were coming and picking them up. I did that for well over a year, if I remember correctly. And that was just, we need to do our part for people who shouldn't be in those situations, and we're close enough to us. And now we went to someone's wedding and we stay connected with them. They're all doing well again, because thank goodness Macau and Hong Kong and China are getting past their zero COVID. And, we feel very humbled to be part of their life, to help them, crest that challenging part of their life. And now they're doing very well again. And we see some of them, getting reward and recognition for the great work that they're doing in their jobs, and their families are flourishing. So we were just, a little part of that world that makes it a little bit better. So that was always, that's always a great story, and something my wife, I have to leave it for her. She was good, and the kids get involved and families were getting involved. We had 20 people in our house putting stuff together, and people using vans or our car. So that was great. So we do a number of different things. In Hong Kong, we helped out Crossroads. Big shout out to Crossroads Hong Kong. If you're in Hong Kong or you visit Hong Kong, please check. If you don't know Crossroads, please make some time to check out Crossroads. One of the best organizations in Hong Kong. Been here for so many years. That family is well known. They give back to Hong Kong, and they give back to the world in distribution, in education of disabilities and poor, and simulation programs. So we give back to Crossroads where we can. And then also another organization called Community Business. Another shout out to Community Business. They're about helping organizations and to build their CSR programs and connect people together, education amongst underprivileged children in Hong Kong, and then diversity and inclusion, which is always important to keep that going. So yeah, we get involved with a number of things where we can, and things are interested, and that's where you get the most passion, right? Don't go do charity work just because you got to check a box. Go find something
do something that you care about.
Yeah, and there's lots of it. There's lots of lots of things, and they don't have to be complicated. They don't have to be difficult. It could be, I'm just going to go find a soup kitchen and I'm going to go whatever the schedule is and help out some people. Or I'm really good at marketing. So I'm going to go to an organization and I'm going to find out maybe a nonprofit that needs some marketing help. And I'm going to use the skill that I've learned, gone to school with, I get paid to do, and I'm going to apply it to this organization that's struggling but really needs it, and give back there. So there's never a short. There's a long list of things that people need help with, and it's not hard to find, and you just need to take the time to do it. And a lot of time I hear people, oh, I just don't have the time, and you're like, you do, you just don't make the time, and you need to if you don't believe you have the time to give back, I think in my view, you may want to reassess a little bit of how much time you're putting into different things. And unfortunately, it tends to be work. And one thing I learned is life should never be about work. Work should just be what you do to provide for the things that you need in life. And work should never be so important that it impacts your family life or impacts your ability to give back. You need to really say, you know what, I can do that tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it's not as we sometimes we take it too urgently or too critically, that a situation that, oh no, I need to do this, I need to work on it. No, you probably don't, and you can use that time to give back.
Yeah. And one of the things that I like to say is, work can wait, but life can't wait. And I don't know if you've heard this before, and this is one of the things that I really admire Satya, our CEO of Microsoft. And I remember at one point he mentioned that, actually multiple points, he mentioned that work should support our lifestyle. It shouldn't be the other way around. Work should be part of us, but work shouldn't be all of us.
Yeah.
And I think that's the essence of what you're saying earlier too.
Yeah.
Hey, Michael, I just want to thank you for sharing so much information about, how it was growing up for you and for some of your, family members with similar background coming for adoption. I think your insight is going to help a lot of people who are waiting for adoption or, who are in the process of considering adoption. And then, just a lot of the interesting community work that you and your family are doing and contributing back to the community, and really sharing these privileges with the people that are not so lucky, if I could put it that way. So I want to thank you for that, Michael. And like I said, today is a special day for me, the first episode in 2023 on my birthday, and just my honor to have a chat with you. But before I wrapped up, I just got a couple of spontaneous questions I want to ask you on the spot.
Oh, rapid fire time.
Michael.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. Okay. You recommended a number of charities over our chat. If there's one charity we should all check out, or maybe I'll give you two or three, what would those charities be?
The first one I would say, especially for the ones in Hong Kong, Crossroads. They always need help. Easy volunteering, very rewarding. You get your hands dirty or you don't, definitely check them out. They're a great organization. For those worldwide and want to get their hands dirty, Habitat for Humanity, great organization to give back and help people for homes. And the last one I would say is Movember for the guys out there to think about men's health and those types of things, but also as a family thing. So those would be my top three.
Great. I actually tried Movember many times, but as an Asian man, I don't get a lot of hair on my face. So it's always hard to grow a beard.
That's okay. It doesn't have to be facial hair. Just like our Mo sisters, facial hair growing is usually not on their list, but it's just information sharing and community.
Yeah. My second thing I want to ask you is, life does get tough. We get thrown around with challenges, right? For people who are suffering, what's the one key takeaway you want to share with them?
Don't reach out. We're all struggling something. If someone says they have the best world in life, yeah, maybe they do, but we're all struggling with something, and to be honest, it's maybe a bit tougher these days. And as you get older, you have more responsibilities. it's good to share that. Many times, we have children, right? And we're like, oh my goodness, my kid is this, my kid is that. And we think it's so unique. It's not. You talk to your friends and you're like, oh my goodness, if my kid does this one more time, you're like, oh, my kid does that too. You're like, you're no different. So when you think it's like, oh, I'm stressed with how am I going to make ends meet or this or that, I'm sure there's someone in your circle who's dealing with the same thing. Don't be shy about it. Just talk about it, or figure out a nice, easy way to bring up the conversation. Like, hey, how you doing today? I've struggled with a few things. You kind of deal with that. If it's a short conversation, okay, maybe that's not the person to have the conversation with, but don't bottle it up, because stress will eventually hit a peak, and that's it's too late then. It's too late, and it's so easy to talk. It's so easy to talk. So that would be my message.
Thank you. Very, very powerful. Michael, and my last question. I am doing a couple more episodes with, somebody, on this planet in this month. What's the one question you want to ask them? You don't know who they are. One of them is going to be a principal for kindergarten. And I'll be speaking with a lady, I think she's Canadian, and she has turned pro athlete after she turned mid-30s. Oh. What's the one question you want to ask him? And I'll pass it on, and I'll just say, Michael De Haas wanted to ask you this during the show.
So if I got this correctly, she's a person's changing careers and also kind of doing something quite, I don't know, extreme or different. Is that? My question would be, what's the underlying motivation? What's the underlying motivation? And I think I know what it could be, and I'm very interested in that, partly because we did a session in our company just recently, and it was around change and empowerment. And I kind of stood up and I'm like, I think I'm the epitome of that, because I've been a delivery person all my life in my career. And I work for some great companies, and then I start working for Microsoft now. But I was never in sales before, and well, I'm not shy about it. I'm almost 50, so technology I know, my industry I know, but sales I didn't. So my motivation is I'm still learning. I should always be learning, and to learn sales, I've never done it before, is a benefit. So for that individual, I'm curious, what's your motivation? What has driven you to do these maybe big changes in your life? Yeah, that would be mine.
Cool. I'll let her know. Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much for making time today. I had a great fun. Hope you had some fun too. And, have a beautiful day and have a great weekend.
Thank you very much, Aaron. It's been a pleasure having a conversation with you, and I hope my sharing inspires a few people either to look at giving back or at their adoption and the way that they're managing through what they have already, or maybe what they're looking to do in the future. So thanks very much. Have a great birthday. Happy birthday again, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, mate.
Cheers.